Hello there, Casca here, and I am coming to you live on this New Year's Eve day. I am not officially back from my hiatus. There are some things I'm still sort of pondering as I am trying to figure out what it will look like to return and what that means and what I can do. But I figured since the year is closing, it might be a good idea to sort of finish up my mini series on Taylor Swift that I started earlier this year. I'd been through a not so brief history of her career, kind of trying to explore the cultural narratives of femininity and sort of the fragmentation of that through the lens of Taylor Swift and her life and the stories that she shared. And to wrap it up, I kind of want to try to tackle that by talking about her newest original album, Midnights. So today, we're going to do some Midnight Madness. We'll kind of go through the album and I'll hopefully be able to kind of express my feelings and wrap all of these things up in a little bit of a bow. But before I get too far into the album, I want to start with this article that I found this last month. And the title was, "You May Not Be a Swiftie, but Be Glad Your Daughter Is." And this title definitely sort of jumped out to me because as much as I have some interest in Taylor Swift, and the whole phenomenon around that because of my own participation with womanhood and the narratives that kind of go along with that culturally, I was more interested in these questions because I was very aware that I was having a daughter. And I just kept struggling with these questions of what should it be that I'm teaching her about femininity and navigating those narratives, and sort of how should I help her as she's navigating the narratives promoted by broader culture, and how much of those align with the ideal of femininity and where do they differ? And honestly, how do you even get to good answers to questions about what the ideal feminine even is? And so, yeah, Taylor Swift has interested me because I think the phenomenon around her is very often presented as a positive force in understanding and participating in those sorts of questions. And the introduction to this article definitely sort of falls into that camp. And I'll sort of read the introduction here now. She writes, "Happy International Taylor Swift Month to all those who celebrate. You might well think that December is the time that the world observes Christmas, but I'm here to tell you that actually it's now when the world observes the magnificence of a 33-year-old from Pennsylvania with the middle name Allison. To wit, last week Taylor Swift was named the Time Magazine's Person of the Year, an honor previously bestowed on such luminaries as Mahatma Gandhi, Winston Churchill, Martin Luther King Jr., and Pope John Paul II. So right off the bat, we have clearly a very high bar for Taylor Swift, who has replaced the celebration of the birth of Jesus for the birth of Taylor Swift, which is sort of interesting. I had a live stream conversation on Paul Vanderklay's channel about the Barbie movie, and Sam talked about Taylor Swift being sort of this image of the divine feminine. And I won't go that far because I think there's a lot of weight to that whole idea of divine feminine, especially in traditional religions. But there is something really interesting about the phenomenon of Taylor Swift and celebrity turning them into some sort of religious figure or religious icon of womanhood or femininity or something to aspire to. And you definitely get that sense here at the first part of the article. But I digress. I'll continue on. Now, you may think, what has Taylor Swift done that could possibly match the achievements of these men? How can a woman who sings about failed relationships with Harry Styles and feuds with Katy Perry have earned a place on a list with such inspirational humans? And I'm here to tell you, because she's changing the way your daughter thinks about herself for the better. Swift is loved by millions, nay, billions. Her songs are not just your standard girl power fare, the type that were previously written by men. No, she writes music that makes you feel less ashamed to be yourself. Songs that own perfectly appropriate female responses to bad behavior that have, in the past, been dismissed as hysteria. And she does it while refusing to make money for anyone other than herself. She is, in short, the real deal, a very good thing. She was modeling behavior to your daughter that would really, really that you should really, really be encouraging. Now, the rest of this article, I would say, was not very interesting to me. It felt like she spent most of the essay talking about Swift and her business and financial successes, which to me is honestly the least interesting part of the whole Taylor Swift phenomenon. But what I do think is interesting to ponder is that last sentence, uh, which, I, for me is the thesis of her essay. Uh, is Taylor Swift modeling behaviors that I should be encouraging my daughter? Is that true? What is Taylor Swift actually trying to promote? And I think the best way to kind of break down that question, or a good way, there's probably a lot of good ways to break this down, but the way that I found most compelling to break down this question is by breaking down her newest album. So, Midnights. It is a concept album basically pitched as 13 stories from sleepless nights scattered throughout Taylor's life. And I'll read the sort of introduction that she posted on her Instagram when she let the album out. And by the way, I didn't say this at the front. It's New Year's Eve. There are fireworks going out. So if you hear, loud bangs, I'm fine. It's just a lively celebration in my neighborhood. All right. So here's what she put out with the album. We lie awake in love and fear and turmoil and tears. We stare at walls and drink until they speak back. We twist in our self-made cages and pray that we aren't, right this minute, about to make some fateful, life-altering mistake. This is a collection of music written in the middle of the night, a journey through the terrors and sweet dreams, the floors we pace and the demons we face. For all of us who have tossed and turned and decided to keep the lanterns lit and go searching, hoping that just maybe, when the clock strikes 12, we will meet ourselves. And Midnights, the story of 13 sleepless nights scattered throughout her life. Out October 21st. So in this new era that we're moving into, it seems like she's appealing to old formulas. We are being signaled that the frame that we had in the Evermore and folklore eras, where we were looking at fictional stories, is being left for the moment in exchange for a return to more personal diaristic songwriting. And we get this chance to revisit these pivotal moments in Taylor's life that kept her up with these sleepless nights. And what I think it ultimately does is create a benchmark for the evolution of the narrative shift that Taylor has gone through, and not just Taylor, probably broadly culturally as well. So how am I breaking this down? It's really difficult to think about how to break down an album, because songs themselves have their own sort of narratives where they can stand alone and they tell a certain story. But there's also this recognition that these songs are embedded in a larger collection of work. And the best artists, I think, what they do is they weave together these different individual songs into the larger narrative, where even though these narratives in these 3 to 5 minute songs can stand on their own, have a different, more impactful meaning when seen in the whole body of that collected work. It's sort of like if you think of a movie clip, you can watch a movie clip and, be enthralled by it, get a certain sense of the film, but you're not going to be able to get the sense of the whole story. And you might be missing the point of the scene if you're not seeing it in its proper orientation. So the way that Taylor and the music industry has sort of developed, you have the radio hits, and people know those, but then a lot of the other things on the album don't actually get much attention. And with Taylor, that's specifically true. You definitely have the radio hits that are more commercially successful, and then you have what my sister likes to call the deep cuts, that are the lesser known, less commercially successful songs. But both of these things together weave and create this lore behind Taylor Swift, and ultimately kind of give more of the well-rounded perception of what she's aiming for in an album. So to tackle this, I'm going to start with the singles and the radio hits that she sort of led with the album. And from there, weave in a couple of the lesser known songs and try to kind of figure out what it is Taylor is promoting, how she sees herself, and where it leads, I think, us to see what's happening culturally with the idea of womanhood. So let's start with Antihero. Antihero was the first single that was sort of led with on Midnights. It was actually my first exposure to it as well. And it's the seeds, watching this video were the seeds that sort of sparked me to do this series. According to Taylor, this is one of her most vulnerable albums, or vulnerable tracks, where she explores some of her deep insecurities. And there are a couple things that sort of strike me with this song. And the first is this acceptance of responsibility. The whole song, she keeps repeating the phrase, "It's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me." And there's something a bit interesting about that for Taylor. First of all, she's made her whole career sort of playing this game of subverting expectations to prove others wrong. But in this song, she's sort of being a little more vulnerable about the insecurities that plague her, basically admitting that the criticisms lobbed at her by the public are usually the ones that she lobs behind herself in closed doors. So while she continues the cycle of expectation, subversion, she's doing the things you don't expect from her, but she is also admitting to being exactly what you expect. But with that, it sort of shows a more human side of her. Instead of her usual MO of curating a story where she's this underdog who is unfairly persecuted, she embraces the frame of the anti-hero as she wrestles with life choices that have led to these insecurities, and how the ambition she has in her career and in other places in her life has increased the prominence of those shortcomings. And I think the song is a very relatable sentiment. There's this acknowledgement that we're all sort of fall short of the ideal. And I think the way we handle ourselves with the struggler, the way we handle ourselves with these struggles, particularly in the face of a social media culture where we're all cultivating our lives and putting things out about ourselves on the internet, it just, I think we resonate with that sentiment of feeling that pull that Taylor has, being a public figure. And I also think there has been lots of this criticism that Taylor makes herself the unprovoked victim. And so to be more upfront about these shortcomings is an interesting way to lead this album off. I think it's done on purpose to kind of help us tell something, but I'll get there in a minute. Outside of just the interesting part of this, there is a little bit of a sadness to this song that doesn't fully come off because of it being masked with the happy beats and sort of the lyricism that Taylor brings to the song. But there's this hint of self-loathing that runs through the tune that you can really tell if you isolate some of the lyrics. There's a lot of really cutting lyrics in this song. For example, "Did you hear my covert narcissism? I disguise as altruism like some kind of congressman." But the lyric that stood out to me the most, and that I think relates most closely to sort of male-female relationship dynamics, were the lyrics that led into the chorus. And it's included in the song 2 different times in slightly different iterations. But the second iteration of that goes, "I wake up screaming from dreaming. One day I'll watch as you're leaving, and life will lose all its meaning for the last time." And for me, this is a really revealing sentiment because it shows us that the ideal of romantic love is still a very important part of Taylor's life. And it's still a thing that drives and influences her strongly and that she puts a lot of meaning into. And that is a continuation of the thing that she has done throughout her whole career. But the last thing that I think resonates with the song before I move on is that the way that it is framed really begs us to look at Taylor as an unreliable narrator. She spent a lot of her career trying to cultivate an image that she's happy, poised, put together, but now you get this sort of glimpse of the darker side and more hidden part of her, where she feels the actions that she's taken in her life have led to a bit of this despair. And she's certainly hinted at insecurities before, but she really leaned into it in this introduction of the album. And whether intentionally or unintentionally, it almost signals us to be on the lookout for the fragmentation to come on the rest of the album and wrestle with these narratives that are being presented to us. And I think it's definitely something she continues to play with in her next single. So the next single, next, is Bejeweled. And the song is interesting enough. It's basically detailing Taylor being in a relationship where she feels overlooked, and her response is to go out and captivate the attention of others to prove that she's valuable. And there's a lot to mine in the masculine and feminine dynamics, but what I found the most interesting in regards to this song was actually the music video itself. So the music video is basically a Cinderella story, but sort of flipped on its head. It's chock full of modern subversions where the princess character isn't trying to win the love of a prince. She's trying to get redemption from a broken happily ever after, from a prince that kind of tired of her. And the stepmom, she is obviously painted as a villain, but one of the things she says to kind of cement that villainous role of her is that the most important thing a woman can achieve in her lifetime is a proposal. And the winner of this prince and the castle and the acclaim is not decided by the prince, by the woman who's most strikingly beautiful, but it's the one who's deemed most talented by the queen. But the subversions come to its peak at the end of the video, where you see Taylor. Oh, sorry, my computer is freaking out. Here we go. The subversion takes a peak at the close of the video as Taylor wins the contest, and she takes a castle but ghosts the prince. And the prince doesn't really seem fussed about this, and the scenario is sort of this happy ending where Taylor is standing on the balcony of her newly acquired castle, reveling in the accomplishments of fairly once spoiled. And this is strikingly different than some of the happy endings that were embedded in some of her old work. Take, for example, Love Story. She changed the Romeo and Juliet ending from ending in death to marriage. But here, Bejeweled is now flipping the Cinderella story from a tale of love and marriage to a girl boss narrative of valuing self-earned riches over winning the affections of a man or the title of wife. It's almost calling into the questions and narratives promoted by the younger version of herself. And well, it's doing that. It's questioning past narratives that she has promoted. It's also sort of, in my mind, a bit of a different comparison from the girl we see in Antihero. Antihero, we have someone who is putting all of their meaning defined in a relationship, yet Bejeweled, she is defining her worth in her ability to captivate a room. As much as she wants the love and attention of a partner and a romantic partner, she would rather sparkle and gain the attention from those who she sees, who see her worth outside of that relationship, and does not want to be unequally matched in affection. And again, we have this other layer that we have of the dynamics of men and women and the role of woman and the way we should see a relationship. It continues to grow with the next single, and we'll see this pattern continue as we keep going. But we'll start with Lavender Haze. So Lavender Haze is the next single and music video that came out, and it's actually the song that leads off the album. And it's basically, the film is basically sort of like a 70s fever dream where you have these sort of like, how would you describe it? Like mystical hippie feeling where she's sort of like engulfed in this sort of love glow. And that's where sort of the song matches in tone. While there's a lot of, like, the song talks about how there's a lot of people speculating about her relationships and where it will lead, whether it's marriage or one night stands. And she states in so many words that she doesn't want to revert to the 1950s narrative. and just wants to be engulfed into sort of her private love spiral. And this is where she sort of starts to challenge the role that she should play as a woman. And you kind of have this role subversion that's going on um, in her song. Um, it's definitely more of appeal to that 70s free love movement that was reacting against the traditional forms of marriage and sexuality for a more liberated ethic. And so here, it doesn't feel like she's railing against romantic love and sort of this girl boss narrative, but more railing against the expectations that she has societally in the role she should play in the lived narratives. Now, each of these songs could have their own commentary video as you break down the stories that are communicated and the ideal of femininity and the roles of men and women in the stories and those lived experiences and the way they shape them. But the most fascinating thing to me about all of these is that they live on the same album. When you look at these songs and their placement on the album, you go from this sort of 70s love drunk anthem of just wanting love and being lost in that and not caring about marriage, which very quickly transitions into the anxiety ridden anti-hero, where she's worried about her insecurities ending that relationship. And then eventually to the girl power, the girl empowerment, men are disposable narrative, Bejeweled. And it's just a small glimpse of the fragmentation of Taylor Swift's journey. And that journey seems to be more fragmented as we dive deeper into the album. Now, it's hard for me to pinpoint just a few songs to display this fragmentation because the stories that are included in this album are just chock full with these dynamics of love and loss and the experience of those things as a woman. For example, Midnight Rain is a song that details her dealing with a relationship that ended because of her own ambition and her desire for fame when the partner was seeking marriage. Or there's something like Snow on the Beach, where she's really trying to cultivate that sort of anxiety that comes with very early romance and sort of glorifying that anxious love glow. But I think there are a few songs on the album that I think give a real vulnerable look at Taylor and her journey and the different roles that she's played throughout, uncovering what it is to be a woman and that grander picture of her real life. And so I'm going to try to hone in on those ones. And to start, I'm going to focus on You're on Your Own, Kid. Now, this song feels like a real guided tour through the life of Taylor Swift, detailing the ups and downs of her rise to fame and sort of what fueled her ambition. Song starts with a tale of unrequited love by a boy who doesn't see her as anything but a friend. And it's this sense of loneliness that drives her to write songs and become a performer. But on her journey to fame, she realizes this desire for recognition and success is shared by many. The next section of the song really details the pain and experience that she experienced in this rise to the top. And I'll read those lyrics now. From sprinkler splashes to fireplace ashes, I gave my blood, sweat, and tears for this. I hosted parties and starved my bodies like I'd be saved by a perfect kiss. So here we kind of see how this journey sort of gave her a loss of innocence and how she chased a career and an unhealthy beauty standard to hopefully find a relationship that would save her. It continues. The jokes weren't funny. I took the money. My friends from home don't want to say. I look around in this blood-soaked gown and I saw something they can't take away. And it continues, because there were pages turned with the bridges burned. Everything you lose is a step you take. So make the friendship bracelets, take the moment and taste it. You've got no reason to be afraid. And it all closes with the statement, you're on your own, kid. Yeah, you can face this. You're on your own, kid. You always have been. So that second part of the, what she lost from it, it really kind of shows the pain and what she traded for a paycheck and how it distorted her relationships. But in the end, she believes that there is this solace to know that she's faced this on her own and she can continue to do that. And, there's this call to embrace and hold innocence, cherish friendships. And in those moments, um, it will help you to move to take on this journey and this challenge on your own in the end. And you definitely kind of have this hopeful tone to it all, revealing, I think, sort of this hyper individualism that's really baked into American culture. But when I really look at it, it's sort of sad. Humans are incredibly relational beings. And the feeling that Taylor and so many others believe the answer to this feeling of loneliness and broken relationships and ambition is to accept that you're on your own and put all that strength on yourself. It's sort of disheartening. But again, we get another side to this question and sort of ask, is this really the narrative that Taylor believes with the next song that I'm going to focus on, which is Sweet Nothing? Now, this is a song about a relationship that's sort of long-term and how she finds happiness running home and experiencing these quiet moments with a partner who's there and supports her. The chorus goes, "They said the end is coming. Everyone's up to something. I find myself running home to your sweet nothings. Outside they're pushing, shoving. You're in the kitchen humming. All you ever wanted from me was sweet nothings." And so again, it's this joy of being able to escape the pressure and chaos of life and live alongside someone else. She isn't on her own. She has someone to remind her of what matters. And this, I think, is a little bit different than the Lavender Haze, where it was sort of more surface level and physical, where this feels like it's more grounded, small moments. And that's why I find it really interesting. But the bridge goes on with these lyrics, which I also find really interesting. Industry disruptors and soul deconstructors and smooth talking hucksters out glad handing each other, and the voices that implore you should be doing more. To you I can admit that I'm just too soft for all of it. And I think this bridge really highlights a tension that Taylor's had to deal with most of her career. There was always this pressure from the public and even from herself to be a role model or to stand for the good. And there was this feedback that she wasn't doing enough. It didn't matter what she did, it was never enough. And I think that probably comes particularly true in the way that she stepped into political conversations. There's always this pressure to be strong in the fight and stand up and be a better ally. But she gets this peace being able to know that there's someone who can show her soft side and get grounded in the little things. And this song is actually one of my favorites on the album because in many ways, to me, it reflects and replicates the feeling of what it's like to be in a good marriage. It's not just the glamorizing the physicality of a relationship or relishing in excitements of like a secret or unpredictable situation. It's the acknowledgement that there is this beauty that comes with stability and long-term commitment. And I think it's really beautiful, but it definitely leaves a little bit more of a haunting imprint as the album continued to develop and we sort of move forward. So this album is sort of the Taylor Swift evolving album because there's new renditions of the album that have come out as the release has gone through. So we got the 3 a.m. edition, which added a lot of like heart-wrenching songs to the album that weren't included on the original. But then there was also the Till Dawn edition that was released during her tour. And it's on that album where I think there's a song that really kind of gets us to a place where we can kind of look at where Taylor is now and sort of see even more fragmentation of her stories and the way that she's developing relationships. So the song is You're Losing Me. And I don't really like to get into the personal details of this album because it is not necessarily important, but one of the reasons that this song was so significant is because the song came out after it was released that her 6-year relationship had come to an end. When the original album had been published, she was still in that relationship that had been this long-term thing. And then about 6 months later, when she was beginning to start her Eras tour, it announced that they were no longer together. And it became sort of a real revealing song into the place where she was. And the most famous line in the song is the bridge. And I wouldn't marry me either, a pathological people pleaser who only wanted you to see her. And it's with this line that it sort of really gets us to rethink and change the whole perception of the album and everything that came before. For example, a song like Lavender Haze or Sweet Nothing, which were thought to be about this relationship, are refamed in a light um, that really heightens that fragmentation of what she wants and who she thinks she should be. The all you before Lavender Haze, what could have been this all you need is love sentiment, where Taylor is declaring she's evolved past the desire for marriage, hits differently when you compare it to the sentiment disclosed in this bridge. And it's really just interesting in a long-term relationship. Oh, sorry. Is she really just interested in this long-term relationship or with no marital commitment? Or is there something that she's desiring for that's deeper and greater than that? I mean, which story is true? What is it that Taylor's trying to reveal with this album? It's not so clear. It's not clear cut. I think that that's actually a little bit on purpose. And whether she meant to or not, I think what it really does is reveals something that I think is very prominent in our modern culture, and that's sort of this fragmented female. And you get a really good view of like an image of that when you look at her Eras poster. Taylor's all these women, and they are all her. But what is the ideal, and which woman should we see as the one that is the epitome of femininity? You can clearly see the way that she's grown up and changed, but she's been such a chameleon. And I think you kind of see this reflected in the lives of a lot of other women who are sort of trying to stumble through the story and figure out what it is to represent womanhood well in the face of postmodernism and the loss of tradition. The answer to what it is to be a good woman sort of lies within yourself. And so we have to discover who that is and what that means for us through self-exploration, life experience. And, there's definitely this sense of attractiveness to that sort of freedom. But what I think it's doing to women is leaving them feeling a bit lost. It's like most women are trying on costumes, seeing what works, and then moving on when it doesn't, and feeling like they have to deal with the consequences of all those things on their own. And I would say it's not necessarily the most hopeful or helpful picture. And this realization sort of brings me back to the article at the start of this video, which is, should I be happy that my daughter is a Swiftie? Well, frankly, my daughter is far too young to identify as anything. So at this point, it's just an interesting question to ponder. There's no reality to it. But I think before I can answer that, I want to share some of the words that come from Taylor herself. So on the 3 a.m. edition of the album, she released a song called Dear Reader, and it's the close of the album. And when I read the lyrics of that song, it's chock full of advice that it seems like Taylor is giving, whether to herself or to someone else, but she's giving this advice. And in my estimation, some of it's healthier than others, but all the advice that's given is caveated with the lyrics. Never take advice from someone who's falling apart. And I think the bridge sort of cements that sentiment more. But I think more than just cementing that sentiment, it kind of reflects the whole feel of what I think Midnights was, what I think Midnights was trying to do. And so I'm going to read through those lyrics and then kind of try to bring everything to a close. So it goes, So I wander through these nights. I prefer hiding in plain sight, my fourth drink in my hand, these desperate prayers of a cursed man slipping out to you for free. But darling, darling, please, you wouldn't take my word for it if you knew who was talking. If you knew where I was walking, to a house, not a home, all alone because no one's there, where I pace in my pen and my friends found friends who care. No one sees when you lose, when you're playing solitaire. And all of this is closed with the repeated sentiment, you should find another guiding light. I shine so bright, but I shine so bright. And to me, I think this is just a really powerful example of the power of beauty and the caution we should take wielding it and consuming it. Beauty has the power to make things look more appealing, even if they aren't. And while the songs delivered by Taylor Swift portray a reality of what it can be to be human, and she really plays on vulnerability and sharing her real, authentic feelings. I think in the song, she's imploring us not to let beauty that she's able to create be the dictator for the past actions that she took, and not make them excusable or the thing to be upheld and looked for. I think there are a lot of behaviors and narratives modeled and promoted by Taylor Swift that I don't hope my daughter would imitate. And there are a lot of good things too. And that's sort of the problem of being human. We're capable of a lot of good and bad. And if you're writing about the human experience, it's hard not to include both of those things. So to answer the question, would I be glad if my daughter was a Swiftie? I'm sort of neutral on the outcome of that. I'm just more hopeful that whatever she finds interesting, whatever she wants to identify as, in a fandom of sorts, I hope she can first have a good relationship with the things that she consumes and be intentional about those things and the way that they're shaping her. And I hope that by doing that, it'll teach her how to separate things. It'll help her separate the things that are beautiful from what isn't. And it's not an easy path to navigate. But I hope she can learn those things along the way. And I'm hopeful I can learn those things along with her. So yeah, that's it. That's the close of my Taylor Swift series. And it's been fun. But, all good things have to come to a close. So I don't have much left to say, so I'll leave it at that. But thank you for all of you who are watching and who will watch us later. And I hope to see you all soon. Bye-bye.